positioning and stacking context. I promised you guys this deep dive video on positioning and stacking context, right? In our day 5 video lecture. And here it is. We touched on positioning basics in day 5, right? We learned the basic usage of position, like position, absolute, relative, fixed, right? But today we are going to master it completely. Positioning is one of those topics that can seem confusing at first, but once you understand it, you'll have incredible control over your layouts. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how elements are positioned on web pages, how to stack elements on top of each other, and how to create complex layouts that will be impossible with just regular document flow. I'm going to explain every single line of code we write today, so don't worry about getting lost. So without wasting much time, let's dive in. So today's complete breakdown of what we are covering are: the first one is we are going to cover the all 5 position types with detailed explanations. Second, understand the positioning context, what elements position relative to. The third one is Z-index and stacking context, controlling what appears on top. We'll come to that. And the fourth one is practical examples with step-by-step explanations. And the fifth and the last one is common positioning patterns you'll use in real projects. Now let's start with the fundamentals. Static positioning. Before that, let's write our HTML. Okay. So I'm gonna use my shortcut Emmet abbreviation here. If you are using a laptop, just hold shift and then press on 1, right, and click enter. Okay, let's name the title CSS positioning and stacking context. Okay, actually let me open it in a browser using my live server extension. Okay, there we go. We have our document opened on Chrome browser, right? So actually let me show you an example. Excuse me. Let's say relative element, right? Position relative top 20 pixels, left 30 pixels. So the element is positioned relative to where it will normally be in the document flow. Position relative here tells the browser I want to move this element from its normal position, right? And the top 20 pixels pushes the element 20 pixels down from where it will normally be. And the top 20 pixels means move away from the top by 20 pixels, right? The left 30 pixels pushes the element 30 pixels to the right from where it will normally be. Move, which means move away from the left by 30 pixels. The original space is still reserved though. Other elements act like the relative element is still in its original position, even though visually it has moved. Okay, let me show you an example with HTML and CSS actually. Let me write my HTML here. So let's say we have this box called which has a class of box, right, and contains this text box 1. Okay, let's create another box, and if you're using VS Code, this shortcut, you will just type period and then your class name like this, and you can also add two classes in the same attribute, right, like this. Let's say box sorry, relative box. Okay, let's say box 2 relative, right. Now let's name our box 3. Actually, let me just use some Emmet abbreviation. It's kind of a shortcut in VS Code. That's why I told you VS Code is the best web editor out there, best text editor for web development, I would say. Okay, so these are HTML so far. Can you see that in our browser? It's just plain text for now before we start implementing CSS. Now this one I just showed you how it works. Let me actually comment it out. And make sure in each and every CSS file you start, make sure you do the reset styles using a universal selector. You reset the margins to 0, the paddings to 0, and set the box sizing. You know box sizing, right? Box sizing to border box. Okay, there we go. So now let's select box, right? Let's give it a width of 100 pixels, height of 100 pixels, and background of light blue. Okay, let's give it a margin of 10 pixels, space between them. Now let's select the relative box. Okay, can you see that? Actually, let me add some padding also, so that it has some space inside. Okay, it looks better now. Let me give it position of relative and top 15 pixels, right. uh, Left 25 pixels. Okay, and right 25 pixels too. Can you see what's happening in our browser? Let me comment this out first. Have you seen what happened with the top first? As you can see, they are the same, right? So now I set down 15 pixels. As you can see, it moved, right? And also move to right by 25 pixels. Sorry, move to right by 25 pixels. Can you see that? And it moved. And then I also said move to left again by 25 pixels. You see? So what happens here is box 2 moves down and right, but box 3 stays in its normal position. Now what happens is that box 2, which is our relative box, it moves down and right. But box 3, as you can see, stays in its place, in its normal position, because the space for box 2 is still reserved. Okay, so this is relative positioning. Now let's talk about absolute positioning. Okay. Mm, let me comment this out, and let me write. Actually, I don't need to comment the CSS, right? I'm just gonna comment out this HTML itself. So right here, let me say position, relative positioning. Actually, can you see that? Okay, there you go. Now let me comment out those three boxes for now. Okay, now let's create a div with the class of container, and inside of it let's create a paragraph element with a text of this is the container. Let's say this is the container content, right? Now let me create another div inside and call it absolute child. Okay, let's say, let's give it instance, let's say absolute positioned. So far as you can see, there's nothing happening in our browser, right? We didn't even start the CSS. Okay, so right now let's go back to our CSS. Let's say absolute positioning. Now let's talk about how absolute positioning works. Let's say that absolute element, the element that we are going to position absolute. The style is like this. Position absolute, right? Top 50 pixels and right 20 pixels, right? Don't worry, there is nothing happening in our browser because we don't have an element with the class of absolute element, right? I'm just showing you this. The element is positioned relative to its nearest positioned parent, a parent with position relative, right? Absolute or fixed. If no positioned parent, if no positioned parent exists, it positions relative to the entire page. Let me break it down line by line actually. The first one, position absolute. This removes the element completely from the normal document flow, right? And the top 50 pixels. This places the element exactly 50 pixels from the top of its positioning context. So maybe it starts from the head of the document or from its parent element which has a position of relative, right? And the right 20 pixels places the element exactly 20 pixels right from the edge of its positioning context. So what is the difference between absolute and relative? Well, with absolute positioning, the original space is not reserved. Other elements move up to fill the gap. Okay. So right now, let me show an example with the container we created. Okay. So let me take this. Let me take this down. Okay. So right now, let's give our container. So this div here, this right here. Let's give it a position of relative, right? Position of relative. This creates a positioning context for the elements inside of it, for its children actually. Let me give it a width of 400 pixels and then height of 300 pixels, and let me give it a background of light gray. Okay, can you see our container in the browser? Let me give it a margin of 20 pixels and padding too, padding of 20 pixels, so that it should have some spacing inside the container. Okay, so let me show you the absolute. We have this element with the class of absolute child here, if you could remember, div class of absolute child, right? So let's say absolute child. Let's give it a position of absolute, right? Nothing happens for now. Let's give it a top of 20 pixels. Let's see what happened. It moved from here, so from the start of this our container, which is here. Can you see where my arrow is? From the start of our container here. For clarification, let me remove the position relative here and you can see what happens. Can you see that? So it's now relative to the entire page, to the browser head, let's say. Okay, see what happened. Let me return the position relative. So it moved from 20 pixels from the top of the container, right? And let's give it a let's say right of 15 pixels. It should move to left. Can you see that? It moved by 15 pixels from here, this side. This is the right side. So actually it moved from there to the left side by 15 pixels. Okay, let me give it width of 100 pixels, height of 80 pixels, sorry, 80 pixels. Let's give it a background of red for us to see it well. Okay, and the and actually let me give it some padding. Let's say 10 pixels. Okay, and let's set the color to white, right? Let's align the text to center. Nothing happened for now. Okay, let me give it a line height of 80 pixels. Oh, actually let me remove this for now. Line height of 80 pixels. Okay, so the red box appears in the in the top right corner of. Actually, let me reduce the line height here. It's too much. Let's say 8 pixels. Oh, that's too small. Let's give it 30 maybe. Okay, there we go. So what happens here is that the red box, as you can see, it appears in the top right corner of the gray container, right? Exactly where we specified. Now if I could say maybe let's say instead of top, let's say bottom. Can you see that it moved to the bottom right corner? Left. Okay, I hope you're understanding what's going on here, because this is crucial skill for CSS developers, for web developers, I mean. So without positioning, as I have told you before, without positioning, let me show you how this will work. Let's say, actually, let me comment out this container here too. And let's say h1, my website, right? And then paragraph, some page content goes here, right? Let's create a div with the class of no positioning context. I just want to show you how it will be without positioning context, right? Okay, I'm absolutely positioned. Another content. Okay, so right now let me give it a let's select our no context here. So what do you mean by no context? So it has no positioning context. Our this thing absolute child here have a positioning context, and its positioning context is its parent container here, which has a position of relative, right? So let's give it a position. I didn't even select it. No context, right? Okay, correct. So let's say position of absolute. Okay, can you see what happened? It moved 0 pixels from the top of the entire page, right? Let me give it right 0. Can you see that? It went back to this side. uh, let me give it a background of blue actually, and the color of the text to be white or whatever. The blue element, as you can see, sticks to the very top right corner of the browser window, right? So this is how absolute positioning works. Now let's talk about fixed positioning. So the way this fixed positioning works is that let me comment this one too out. Okay, so let's talk about fixed positioning, right? let's say we have this fixed element like this. It has these properties: position fixed, top 10 top of 10 pixels, and right 10 pixels, right? So the element here is positioned, sorry, I mean positioned relative to the browser viewport. So the visible area of the browser window, it stays in the exact same position even when you scroll. The position fixed removes the element from the document flow and locks it to the viewport. And the top 10 pixels means this places the element 10 pixels from the top of the browser window, right? And right 10 pixels places the element 10 pixels from the right edge of the browser window. So what are the most use cases of fixed positioning? As you might guess, it's perfect for navigation bars that stick to the top, chat buttons in the corner, back to top buttons. Actually, we'll build all of those for ourselves before the end of this our HTML CSS class, before we move into JavaScript, right? I hope you will be here with me when we start JavaScript, because it's going to be massive, I'm telling you. Okay, so now let me give you an example of fixed positioning. Say fixed positioning, right? So fixed positioning, let's say we have this element with the class of fixed header. We have another element with the class of fixed header, right? And inside of it we have this heading which says fixed header, right? And then we have a navigation like this. Actually, don't worry about the ULLI blah blah. Let me just do this in brief. I just wanted to show you how the fixed positioning works, right? Let me create a main content here. Main element. Let's give it a class of content, right? Let's see. Right. Okay. So this content will scroll under the fixed header. Okay. So let me add one long paragraph again. Let's say Lauren 50. Right. Let me format my document. Okay. There you go. So this is our header here, right? Actually, let us style it. Let's select our fixed header. Right. And give it a position of fixed and top of 0, right? And left to 0. give it a width of 100. So I give it a width of 100% too. Okay. Set the height to 60 pixels, not percent, pixels, right? Let's give it a background of slate blue. Okay. And the color of white or wheat or whatever. And let's give it a border bottom of 1 pixel solid and some hex color, right? uh, let's add a stacking context. Let's give it 1000. So right now it appears above any other content in our page, right? Because there is no content that starts and reads up to 1000 in this our page so far. And I've never even seen something reach like that, right? So let's display it to flex, right? Don't worry about flexbox, we're going to do it. Okay, for now let me just show you this. Justify content space between, right? Let's give it a padding of 0, top and bottom, 20 pixels left and right. Okay, now let's select our content. So our main element here, so here, this one, right? Let's give it a margin top of 80 pixels. Okay, margin top of 80 pixels, and also padding of 20 pixels, right? Okay, cool. But even now the page is unscrollable. As you can see, there are no scroll bars, right? The content is too small. So let me add the text. Okay, since you are just going to generate it, let me say around 1000. Okay, that is huge. I'm just going to show you how this works. Okay, this is the purpose of it, right? So let me wrap it all. So the header stays at the top of the screen no matter how much you scroll up or down. No matter how much we scroll now, it stays at the top, as you can see. So this is fixed positioning, right? You can also send it, let's say you can also say 50 pixels, so it stays there no matter what, it will not move. Okay, because it is the highest in the stacking context, and also it's positioned, it's fixed positioned, right? So let me return it back to 0. So this is how we create fixed navigation bars, those that you are seeing in websites. But there are some websites that you can see from the start it is not fixed, but when you scroll, maybe you passed the hero section, then you will see the nav bar become fixed. So we'll talk about that, but that is, I think, maybe position sticky does that, but I mostly do that with JavaScript using the intersection observer API. But for now, You are just focusing on CSS positioning, right? So I hope you understand how fixed positioning works. Now let's start positioning, sticky positioning, right? Let me comment this out too. It's not needed anymore. I hope you're understanding what I'm doing here because it's very important for you guys. Okay, it's very important because if you skip any concept here, our CSS no be small shege you go see for CSS. Only Nigerians go fit understand this pidgin. CSS go show you pepe guy. So the way sticky positioning works is that, let's say sticky element, right? Position sticky on top of 20 pixels, right? So this means the element behaves like relative positioning until it reaches a specified threshold during scrolling. Then it becomes fixed, like I told you before. Let's break it down line by line. The position sticky creates a sticky behavior that switches between relative and fixed, right? And the top 20 pixels. When the element becomes sticky, it will stick 20 pixels from the top of the viewport, right? How sticky works is that, first, the element starts in normal document flow, like relative. Second, when scrolling will push it past the threshold, it becomes fixed. It sticks until its parent container scrolls out of view. Okay? I hope you understand what I mean. Now let's do something here. Let me show you an example. Actually, let's create some CSS, right? Let me create a sticky navigation. Let's create a sticky header, right? Nav container, and let's create logo. So let me see. Let's say my website. Okay. Let's create the URL, the navigation links. Let me give it a class of nav links. Oh, sorry, I didn't write the attributes. Let's say nav links, right? So li, I hope you have no problem with HTML, right? Because it's not that hard. You just need time and practice. But CSS, you need time, practice, and prayer. right? Now let's say main dot content, right? Let's say, so let me just create one paragraph. Let's say main content goes here. Okay. Okay. So now let's get to CSS. Okay. Let me comment this out. Naturally, let me comment all. There's no need. Let's say sticky positioning, right? So let's select our sticky header class. So this sticky header, right? Sticky header, and give it a position of sticky, right? So this makes the header stick when scrolling. Let me write the comment for you. It makes the header stick when scrolling. Okay. Now let's say top 0, and what this does is that, as you might probably guess, this sticks to the top of the viewport, right? It sticks to the top of the viewport. Okay, let's give it a background of white or wheat or whatever. Actually, let me give it a background of white, right? White is a solid background, so the content doesn't show through. So box shadow, you will know about that, but for now let me just box shadow 0.25 pixels, sorry, 2 pixels, 5 pixels, and then RGBA 0. I hope you know this one, right? I've done this one in our first CSS lecture, CSS class. So you see it creates this shadow here around the border, this box or this shadow here. Okay. Let's give it a Z index of 100 to ensure it appears above all other contents, right? Now let's select our nav container. So this one here, let's select it and say display flex, justify content space between, right? Align items center. Let's give it a max width. Let's give it a max width of 1200 pixels, so 1200 pixels, right? So margin of let's say actual margin 0, top and bottom, auto, left and right. Okay, just give the padding of 1 rem, top and bottom, 2 rem, left and right. Okay, let's style the main content element too. Right, okay, it's just content, not main content. So let me give the padding, just padding top of 20 pixels, right? So we add this space so the content doesn't hide under the header. Okay, so what each line does here is that the position sticky and the top 0. The header scrolls normally until it hits the top, then sticks, right? So Z index 100 means the header appears above other positioned elements. And the box shadow creates a subtle shadow effect when header is sticky. Okay, so this is how it works. Let me add some kind of content. Okay, I'm coming. Okay guys, actually let me add another element here, another paragraph here, and generate this huge text. Okay, so 1000 words. So let's try that and see. Oops, let me change the background of the header to red. Okay, okay, can you see that? Can you see what happened? It's there, right? So let me give you another example. Actually, we are running out of time. I will just stop from here. Okay, we are running out of time actually. So I think it's over for this thing, right? I hope you understand everything from the position, relative, absolute, and all of that. Okay, so now the next thing we are gonna learn is the Z index, right? The stacking context. Okay, so let's do another example of sticky positioning for you to understand it, right? So the tooltip, let's do tooltip with positioning. Okay, let me comment this out. Actually, I'm just gonna delete this one here. We don't need it for sure. Okay, let me comment this one out for now. Okay, let's create a div with the class of tooltip container. right? So let's say hover me. Okay. Let's create the tooltip itself. Give it the class of tooltip, and let's say this is a helpful information, right? So let's get back to our CSS. Let's say let's style our tooltip container. So let's give it a position of relative. So this is the container, right? It creates the positioning context for our tooltip. Okay, let's give it display of line block. So it makes container only as wide as its content, right? Let's give it a padding of 10 pixels, top and bottom, and then let's add 15 pixels left and right for the hoverable area. Let's give it a background of light blue. Okay, so let's give it a cursor of pointer. So as you can see, it's now it shows this hand pointing at the element, right? But before it's the arrow, right? It's the arrow. Or if it's a text, and it shows this writing too. Okay, but with CSS you have power over all of this. The way your page looks and feels, have control over all of this, right? So now let's style our tooltip. Let's give it a position of absolute. Okay, nothing happens. This positions it relative to the tooltip container. Let's give it a bottom of 100%. Okay, let me give it the left of 50%, right? Let's give it transform. We'll also do video about transformations, but not for now. For now, let's just use it. So this video is created especially for positioning and stacking context only, right? But you need to be familiar with the new properties I'm introducing to you before we get to them, right? So that way you will not feel like they are something completely new. So let's translate it 50%. Okay, let's give it a background of black. Let's give it a color, text color of white, and then padding 8 pixels, top and bottom, and then 2 pixels left and right, right? Inside of the tooltip. Let's add some border radius, 4 pixels, let's white space no wrap actually. Okay, so it prevents the text from wrapping. Let's give it opacity of 0, so it's hidden by default. And also the visibility to be hidden, the visibility of the tooltip. So let's add some nice effects using the transition, so it fade in and out smoothly. Let's say opacity, so 0.3 milliseconds. Yes, okay, we'll get to know all of this. We'll get to know about transitions and animations, right? But in the later sections. So let's say tooltip container. So if someone hover over it, over the tooltip container, and then our tooltip, someone hover over the container of the tooltip, then the tooltip itself should be opacity 1, so it displays itself, right? It shows the tooltip on hover, and the visibility to be visible, right? And nothing happens so far. Let me check that. So let me check something. Okay, this is our tooltip here. Actually this is not showing anything. Let me rewrite the CSS. Okay, let me rewrite the CSS. Complete. Okay, so let's give the container position of relative, give it display of line block, padding of 10 pixels, and then 15 pixels left and right. I hope by now you have already know how to use all these properties, right? Background, background, light blue, right? Let's say cursor pointer. Let's give it a margin of 100 pixels actually. Okay, so it centers, it moves it to the better view inside the page, right? Let's select our tooltip. I hope I named it tooltip. No, this is the correct class name, right? So let's say position absolute. Okay, bottom, let's say 100%. Actually, let's say 125%, right? Let me give it maybe left of 50% too. Okay, I hope you're seeing that. So it's better now, right? We are viewing everything clearly. Okay, transform, translate, translate x, right? So it moves minus 50% in the x-axis, right? Inside of the positioning context. So the container of the tooltip, which in our case is the T container, right? So let's give it a background of black. Let's give it a padding of color first. Color white, and then padding of 8 pixels top and bottom, 12 pixels left and right. Okay, you are seeing it clearly, right? Let's remove the white space. Okay. uh, uh Actually, let me hide it. Let's say let's give it opacity of 0. See, it disappeared, right? And the visibility of hidden too. So it completely disappeared, right? So let's get back to our T container again. Say if they hover over the container, then our tooltip should have these properties: opacity of 1 and visibility of visible, right? So let's try that and see. Okay, yeah, it worked. It really does, right? Okay, guys, so as you can see, our tooltip is working correctly, right? So let's now talk about stacking context. So Z index and stacking context, right? So what is Z index? Z index controls the stacking order of positioned elements. Think of it like layers in Photoshop. If you are familiar with Photoshop, higher Z index values appear on top, right? So let me give you a blueprint of what it looked like, one overview actually. So let's say we have this element with the class of behind, and then let's give it a class of relative Z index of 1, right? As you can, for a positioned box, the Z index property specifies the stack level of the box in the current stacking context and whether the box establishes a local stacking context, right? So this is our highlight in VS Code. Okay, all right, now let me give you the background of red. This is just an imaginary element, right? It doesn't exist. So I just showed you. Let me comment this out. We don't need it right now. Okay, so as you can see, the way this works, let me the Z index here, right? The Z index 1, the element is on layer 1, and let's say we have another one. Let's say we have another one below. So if you're in VS Code, in order to copy down something like this, You just need to hold shift and alt and then down arrow key, right? So let's say the start here it's 2, right? The z index is 2. So this one is on layer 2, so it appears on top of layer 1. And the what I want you to note about z index is it only works on positioned elements such as relative, absolute, fixed, sticky. So if you tried applying it on something that is not positioned, it ain't gonna work. As you have seen, I have tried it in the last video, right? It didn't work on all those nav links, blah blah blah. It ain't gonna work, right? So let's have a practical example that you're gonna do now. So let's say we have this element called with a class of stacking context. Okay, stacking context. Let me give it the position of relative, right? Z index of 0, right? So this creates a new stacking context. Let's say it has child elements. Let's say dot child. Child, right? So dot child. Okay, let's give it a position of absolute. Actually, in order for us to see this, let me give it a background of red, maybe. What's going on? Oh, it's below, right? Let me give this one. Let me give it a back z index of 999. Okay, this high z index only applies within its stacking context. Okay, so let's say top 20 pixels and then left 20 pixels too. Okay, so the stacking context creates a new layer group. So the our stacking context container starts a new layer group. No matter how high you set the child's index, z index, it cannot appear above elements outside its stacking context that have higher z index values, right? So let me give you a practical example. Okay, let me give you a practical example with a modal window. Actually, let's delete this. It kind of doesn't explain what I wanted to do. So let's say we have this. Let's change the class to modal window, right? let's say, okay, let's write styles for our modal window here. As you can see, I've created this div with a class of modal window, and it also have a parent div element called content, which holds the text. This is an overlay, right? So let's say, actually let me remove the content. Okay, it doesn't matter. So right now, let me, let's say modal window, right? Let me position it to absolute, give it top. I want it to, basically I want it to cover the whole of the page, right? So top, right, bottom, and left. Okay, and let's give it a background. Okay, as you can see, it covers the entire page. So let me give it some RGB color, right? Zero 0.2, right? So we have this color here. Okay, so let me increase the transparency. So uh, actually let me leave it at 4. Okay, so as you can see, it basically covers our entire page, right? So this I want to show you something with this hover here. Okay, so as you can see, the hover is there, but you cannot touch it, right? Let me show you what happened. Okay, so right now our modal window is on top of every stacking context. Stacking this thing order is the highest in the stacking order, right? So as you can see, I cannot be able to touch this our tooltip here, but let's say we give it so here is our tooltip container, right? Oh, my battery is running down. Damn. So let's give it this thing. So that one is 999, right? So let me give this one 111. Okay. Okay, as you can see, it came out on top, right? Just look at the difference. Okay, so okay, there we go. So it worked perfectly, right? So right now our tooltip container is the highest in the stacking order, right? So this is how stacking context works, how the Z index property works. Okay, I think we are done for today. Excellent work. We now have complete control over CSS positioning. These techniques will let you create sophisticated layouts and interactive elements. Okay. Now, what I want you with you is that you practice, practice, and practice. Okay, it is the key to mastering CSS. If not, omo, no be small shell girl go show you. So, what I want you to always keep in mind is the static position, static, normal flow,
position relative, offset from normal position, absolute positioned within nearest positioned element, parent, sorry, and the fixed positioned relative to viewport, right? And the sticky switches between relative and fixed. Practice these patterns and soon positioning will become second nature. You are well on your way to mastering advanced CSS layouts. Keep experimenting and I will see you in the next lesson. Congratulations, happy coding, and goodbye.